It's no secret that the 2026 offseason for the Pittsburgh Steelers is going to be a big one, a pivotal one in the history of this franchise. And today on Steelers Talk, I'm going to be breaking down the 8 biggest decisions the Pittsburgh Steelers will have to make during this offseason that will shape the 2026 Steelers. Before we get into it today, man, the search is officially on here on Steelers Talk for the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're getting you guys daily updates on the channel whenever the Steelers make their decision as to who the next head coach is going to be. We're going to make sure to get you guys free and informative content on the very latest to let you guys know what's going on in the search for the next head coach of the Steelers. Okay, now let's get into these decisions. The first thing, obviously, is you got to hire the next head coach, and you have to hire the right next head coach, okay? And the 2 things that I think this next head coach has to have, okay, number 1, they have to be a charismatic, quote-unquote, leader of men with a commanding presence, okay? You look at some of the best head coaches in the league, Dan Campbell, okay? A lot of people would include Mike Tomlin in that discussion in terms of these charismatic leaders, right? You know, there's these guys in the league where, you know, when they talk, people listen. When they step into a room, people know that they are walking into it. And this is the type of leader that Art Rooney says that he wants. He said it in his press conference after Mike Tomlin stepped down. He says this is the number 1 thing that he's looking for. And frankly, if you're going to be bringing in somebody to replace Mike Tomlin's role in this organization, you got to have somebody that can hold their own, be that charismatic leader of men, and lead his troops into battle. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, would they bring modern schematics to both sides of the ball? Okay, and this is very important to me. I want a modern scheme, because that's what we've been missing here in Pittsburgh. It's been old school schemes the last several years under the Tomlin regime. I don't care if it's an offensive-minded head coach or a defensive-minded head coach. I just want to make sure that, you know, on both sides of the ball, we're bringing modern schematics to the table for the next era of Steelers football. Then also, with that in mind, you got to hire the right coordinators, especially the one on the opposite side of the ball where the head coach does not specialize in. So if you get an offensive head coach, got to make sure you hire a defensive coordinator that knows what he's doing. If you hire a defensive-minded head coach, you got to make sure that your offensive coordinator knows what he's doing. And if you're hiring, you know, a CEO type that's not going to be calling plays, got to make sure both offensive and defensive coordinators know what they're doing, all right? So the coordinator hires have been kind of a bugaboo for Mike Tomlin in the previous regime. Got to get the right coordinators if you want to get this team back into Super Bowl contention in the next half decade. Then another thing that a decision is going to have to be made on has nothing to do with the Steelers. It comes down to Cam Hayward. What is he going to do? Does he want to play this year? And if so, does he want to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers? And if I'm Cam Hayward, and like he says, you know, I got 1 more year. He said, this is my final contract before I retire. Okay, if I'm Cam Hayward and I'm looking at this Steelers team, you're bringing in a new head coach. There's only been 2 first-year head coaches in the history of the league that have won the Super Bowl. Okay, that doesn't give me great odds. That doesn't give me great odds if I'm Cam Hayward. And really the only reason why I'd want to come back for another season is to win a Super Bowl. So if that possibility is not very high here in Pittsburgh, I don't want to play for the Steelers next year. So if I'm Cam, I would retire or ask for a trade. Obviously, as Steelers fans, we would prefer him to, you know, ask for a trade so that we can trade him somewhere and we can get a decent draft pick for him instead of getting nothing for him. But obviously, if Cam Hayward decides to call it a career coming off of a second-team All-Pro season, I mean, that'd be one hell of a way to cap off a phenomenal season for one of the better interior defenders in the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And for a team like this, that is saying something. But we'll have to wait and see what Cam Hayward wants to do this year with Mike Tomlin leaving the Pittsburgh Steelers organization. But then another big decision that the Steelers will have to make pretty shortly after they bring in their next head coach and their coordinators is what the hell is the plan at quarterback? Because there's a lot of different names that they could look at. They could look at more bridge-type options like Aaron Rodgers or Geno Smith. You could look towards the future with guys like Will Howard or Kyler Murray or Malik Willis or Mac Jones, Anthony Richardson. You could trade up for Ty Simpson. Could bring in kind of a middle-level, starter like a Daniel Jones or something like that. I would say these 10 guys right here, there's probably one of these 10 quarterbacks on your screen right now will be the Week 1 starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's just not a particularly great quarterback class in terms of free agency, in terms of the guys that are likely to be traded, in terms of the guys in the draft. So you got very limited options here, but obviously if you want to, kickstart this next era of Steelers football, picking the right franchise quarterback would be huge. If you get a Malik Willis and he turns into your next franchise guy, that'd be huge. Same thing goes with Mac Jones or Ty Simpson or Kyler Murray. If you hit on the next quarterback here in Pittsburgh, that would be massive. Hopefully the next head coach and Omar can find the right guy. So predict it for me down there in the comment section. Who will be Pittsburgh's Week 1 starting quarterback next year? Do you think they hand the keys to Will Howard? Do you think they bring in a guy like Kyler Murray? Do you think they go out and get a guy like Malik Willis? What do you think? Predict it for me down there in the comment section for today's pin question. In just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And while I tell you about today's sponsor, answer today's pin question. And with that, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And guys, the big game is almost here in Santa Clara this year, and there's no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. And since the big game is right around the corner, that also means that it's your last chance to get into the football action before the season is over. So close out the season out right now with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. With new social feeds feature, you can share Prize Picks with your friends and copy lineups from winners with a single click. Copy lineups you like or use them as inspiration for your own picks. And a new feature from Prize Picks that they now have is early payouts. If your player gets off to a hot start, you now have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. You guys can take a look here at my Prize Picks lineup for Conference Championship Week here in professional football. I'm going to take the more in passing yards for Drake May, the less on passing yards for Jarrett Stidham, the more on passing yards for both Matthew Stafford and Sam Darnold in the NFC Championship game. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Another decision the Steelers will have to make on offense this year is, do they re-sign team MVP for the 2025 season, Kenneth Gainwell, or do they embrace Caleb Johnson as the future of the running back room here in Pittsburgh? And this might be a little bit more of a difficult decision than you might think, because Kenny is going to have a lot of interested suitors on the free agency market. And some people might even offer him an opportunity to be a number one running back with their team this year, especially for teams that live in shotgun and like to pass the ball a lot. Gainwell obviously would be a hell of a number one running back for somebody in a system like that. And if the Steelers aren't going to run a system like that and he's got an opportunity to be the number one guy somewhere else, Kenny might decide to leave the Pittsburgh Steelers this year unless the Steelers pay a premium to have him come back. And with them already paying Jalen Warren on a second contract, I don't know, if Kenny G returning to the Steelers is as much of a sure thing as Steelers fans may think it is, especially because you did just spend a pretty decent draft pick on Caleb Johnson out of Iowa last year, and Caleb still has a lot of promise, man. I know that he didn't get on the field all that often this year, but that's mostly, in my opinion, because Jalen Warren and Kenny Gainwell played so well. And I think that Caleb had an opportunity to sit, to learn, to develop. There was things in his game that he clearly needed to develop coming out of Iowa. He needs to be a better pass catcher, a better pass protector. And, this season allowed him to take a step back, work on his craft without having the pressure of playing in NFL games. And hopefully next year he's, ready to go and be, a legitimate piece to this rotation here in Pittsburgh. And, obviously if you could have Caleb Johnson as your future number one or 1A, it gets the early down work and is kind of your bruiser as that big body running back. And then you get Jalen Warren as that, third down piece, the pass catcher, the pass protector as your 1B type of running back. That is like the ideal setup that you're looking for, especially if you're going to be bringing in a Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan style offense where you're going to be under center, you're going to be running a lot of outside zone, all those different things. And I think that Caleb fits those systems beautifully. So, I don't know if it's as much of a sure thing as Kenny G, coming back next season. I'm certainly open to it. I love Kenny G. He's an awesome player, but I would not be surprised if this team lets him go somewhere else this offseason and embraces KJ as the future of this running back room. Then another thing that the Steelers are going to have to decide on this offseason is, do they trade one of their outside linebackers? Now, obviously, the Steelers have, the best, in my opinion, best edge rusher trio in the game. But, with that, and you have a guy in Nick Herbig, who's going to want a starter's workload moving forward and is going to want a new contract here soon. These guys can only coexist in the same locker room for so long. And that's just the way it works in the National Football League. Like, Nick Herbig is not going to sit there idly by and just, be okay with like 13 to 15 snaps a game. Like, he was going to want to play more. And, I think the reality of the situation is, when you got three players as good as this, it's just tough to have all three on the team and for all three to get the kind of snaps that they, feel like that they deserve. And I think at some point you're going to have to let go of one of them. And, personally, I hate to do this, man, because I love TJ Watt. But I think the right decision is you got to trade TJ Watt this offseason and extend Nick Herbig. Because I think, if you keep Watt and Highsmith, I think Herbig, it might even ask for a trade out of Pittsburgh, all right? And I don't want to sacrifice Nick Herbig, who is a rising star in this league, in my opinion, for a guy in TJ Watt, who by the numbers last year was, your least productive pass rusher by the numbers. Per snap, he was less productive than Alex Highsmith and Nick Herbig in terms of the pressure rates and the quick pressure rates. In terms of the stack production as well. This is just one figure, but, TJ Watt, was your least, efficient pass rusher last year. And, this has nothing to do with run defense, okay? TJ Watt is an awesome run defender. It's part of the big reason why he's so valuable to the Steelers defense, but obviously, I think Highsmith and Herbig show that they can defend the run this year as well. And, you take a look at the cap hits for these guys, like TJ Watt, for the kind of production that he's having, like, he's going to have a quarterback level cap hit next year if you keep him on the team. $42 million at 31 years old. And by the way, it only goes up as the seasons go on his new contract, all right? And I think if you're going to be paying an edge rusher $42 million, that's Myles Garrett level money, man, against the cap. And quarterback level money, you got to have quarterback level value to your team. You got to be putting up close to 20 sacks this season. You got to be, forcing fumbles like crazy, like Watt was in his younger days. But I think we saw a step back physically from TJ Watt last year. And listen, man, that happens to guys, especially speed rushers, when they get to the age of 30 or 31, which he is now. And, I think the time is right now. Where if you can find a suitor or you can get a good draft pick for TJ Watt, you eat the $30 million in dead cap this year. I think with a new head coach coming in, the best time to eat some dead cap on TJ Watt is right now. You save $12 million against the cap. You use some of that money to give Nick Herbig, who's currently on his rookie contract, a nice extension to make him the running mate for Alex Highsmith for the foreseeable future here in Pittsburgh. I did a whole video on TJ Watt, guys, and kind of had a tough conversation of why I think it might be time to trade TJ Watt this offseason. If you want to check out that full video, I have it up on the channel. Put the chip to that one in the top right of today's show. So what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comment section. Would you trade TJ Watt for a second-round pick? Okay, like, you get a lot of guaranteed money off your books for an aging former, superstar edge rusher. I still think Watt is a star-level guy. I don't know if he's a truly elite edge rusher anymore, but give me an A for accept or D for decline. I really think there's a team out there that would take Watt for a second-round pick or maybe even a late first-round pick, and I think the time might be right to get some value out of Watt while he's still valuable on the trade market. Then we get to Patrick Queen, and there's going to be a big decision on Queenie this offseason. Do you bring him back? Do you cut him? Do you trade him away if you can? There's going to be those conversations that we're going to have this offseason, guys, because plain and simply, Patrick Queen is one of the most expensive linebackers in the game in terms of his cap hit next year, over $17 million. He's slated to go against the cap next year, which is the fifth highest in the league among linebackers. And frankly, guys, his production this year just didn't live up to that price tag where, he was the 80th ranked linebacker in football according to Pro Football Focus grading. And I'm not saying PFF grading is gospel, guys, but they do watch every single snap and they grade every single snap of every single game these guys play. So, it is a tool that we can look at. And, the run defense grade wasn't fantastic. The coverage grade was terrible, below a 35. That was 77th out of 80 linebackers in the game. And the one thing he still does at a pretty darn good level is blitz. But, I don't know if I want to pay over $17 million against the cap for somebody that really only blitzes at a high level. He was also, top 10 in the league in missed tackle rate with over a 20% missed tackle rate. That is just absurd for somebody making the money that he's making. And the Steelers can save $13.3 million if they cut him this year. That's a lot of money, okay? Like, that is another potential starter on defense. Like, you could get a different and probably better linebacker for the money that you save by cutting Patrick Queen, and that is unfortunately just the case at this point. But, the one case that I think you could make for bringing Queenie back is if you hire a guy that runs a Mike Macdonald-style defense as your defensive play caller next year, maybe someone like an Anthony Weaver who worked with Patrick Queen in Baltimore back in the day. If you go with someone like that, then I could potentially see Queen being a fit because he was an all-pro in that McDonald defense, okay? I think Queen is definitely not worth his price tag. I think they probably let him go this offseason. And unfortunately, I think that's probably the right move to make. Then the final big decision that the Steelers will have to make is what do they do with Ramsey and where do they play him? Because I don't think they're going to cut him. I've been seeing this up on Steelers Twitter that some people think the Steelers are going to cut him. And they're citing over the cap's figures on his contract. Just so you guys know, over the cap actually didn't account for some of the restructurings of Ramsey's contract that the Steelers did last year. So they have it wrong. Spotrac actually has the correct figures on Ramsey's contract. And it's not really a contract that it makes a ton of sense to cut. Okay, maybe it makes a little bit more sense to trade, but definitely not cut, as his cap hit is over $17 million, but his dead cap hit, if you let him go, is $14.5 million. So you're really only saving about $2.5 million to let go of a player that is still a good player. Like Jalen Ramsey is not a scrub. He is not cooked, all right? He's not the player he used to be, but in this modern day and age in the NFL, guys, where big nickels are as valuable as ever, Jalen Ramsey is still a really good nickel player. He is, all right? You're not going to line him up one-on-one on Jamar Chase and expect him to hold up with him in man coverage on the outside anymore, but he's very physical. He's a very good run defender, a very good blitzer, and he's pretty good as that quarters defender from that nickel spot in that star alignment. He's very, very good at that, and I think that's the question. Do you keep him at safety where he played the second half of this season, or do you put him back to nickel where he played most of his reps to start the season? And for me, I think he's more valuable as a nickel and as a big nickel. And, especially if you bring in this Mike Macdonald style of defense, or, Chris Shula, if he gets hired, he will run, probably a big nickel style defense. He worked with Ramsey as the DB's coach in LA back in the day. So he's got an established relationship with Ramsey. And, I think some of these guys would know how to use him in their defense. And, he's still a phenomenal tackler. He can still make some great anticipatory plays. And I think he's not as natural of a safety as he is as a nickel, and I don't think he can make as much of an impact on the game as he is when he's around the line of scrimmage, when he is around the run game. When you're playing safety, you're so far off, you can't really make a huge impact on the game. But as a nickel, we see it with some of the best in the league, right? With Kyle Hamilton and Derwin James. And by the way, I'm not necessarily comparing Ramsey to the level of these guys, but this just goes to show you that nickel play in the National Football League, and especially big nickel play, is as important as ever. And some of the best defenses in the league, they have this big nickel player. And I still think Jalen Ramsey is more than capable of playing this role for the Pittsburgh Steelers for at least one more season, because in my opinion, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to cut him at this point in time. So those were the 8 big decisions that the Pittsburgh Steelers need to make this offseason that will shape the 2026 Pittsburgh Steelers. If you made it to the end of today's show, type those real ones down there in the comment section. If you made it to the end of the show today, want to give you guys some love down there in the comment section. And that'll be it for today's show, guys. I'll have more Steelers content for you guys as the week goes on, of course, as always. And until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers.